In this video, we're going to explore text on a path. And to access the text on a path tool, we just need to go to the text tool and we need to go over to path. It has this little A with the squiggly line under it, or we can come over here to the floating toolbar. If you see the text tool here, you can click on it and go to the text on a path icon right here. And if I select it, you'll see that I have an A on my keyboard. That lets me know that I'm ready to input text. So I'm going to go ahead and left click right here. And the first thing that happens when you're working with the select text on a path is you get this dialog box. And this dialog box has these little templates to go off of. So if you're wanting to add text, like this squiggly line here, I can select it. And now what it's going to do is just put the letter A. This is one of the only times that you're going to get just one letter and not the word my text. And so just wanted to point that out. So just like working with other text, you have your text input box here where you can just select something, the letter, and change it to something you want. And let's just do Digitizing Master Class. Oh, and I need to spell it correctly, and I'll hit apply. Now this is probably going to be too large. As you can see, it makes it pretty big and kind of goes off the screen a little bit here. So that size of that lettering is a little bit too much. So let me come over here to the height here and choose 0.5 in this box and choose apply. And let's take a look at that. That's much better. So we have now this Digitizing Master Class here, and it's in this squiggly line, and that's just a text on a path is kind of a neat thing because you can choose these different shapes to put it into. And working with these is pretty easy to do. So you have your font, you can choose a different font. Now the moment I choose a different font, it's going to change the font size again. So you just have to keep that in mind. So if I wanted to work with a different font here, I could choose one and then hit apply, but I'm going to have to change the height again of the letters. And this one I might have to go down pretty far in order to get it to all fit. And it's probably not a good font for this design, which it's not. And so some fonts are going to work better than others. And you just have to kind of play with it. And you can always resize it. So you can make this larger or smaller just by clicking and dragging it. And that's just going to make your overall size larger. Now it's not going to change as much like the size of the inner line. But if I come back and I go to the text tool and I choose that path, you'll notice that the line shows back up because now I'm in text edit mode. So the other things that you have in working with text on a path is you have this option here where it says path align, and it says above, center, below, or reflect. Okay, so if I choose below and hit apply, it's going to put it below that line. Okay, and I had it above. I can choose center, reflect, a few different options there. I'm going to stick with above. You can play around with that a little bit if you'd like. And you have the basic things like the width, the height, the spacing, aligning it, center, left or right. That's a good option to kind of look at, because if you're wanting it to come all the way up over here, you might want to choose right align and hit apply, and that's going to bring it all the way over to the end. Or if I choose left, it's going to start up over here and go as far as it can, just like that. So those are the different options that you have. Let me go back to center. And you can see that that puts it back there. The other thing that you do have is the ability to go to the text edit. And we've seen in other videos, you can choose how you want it to stitch out from left to right or right to left, stitch in that order, or center, where it'll start from the center and work to one side and go back to the center and work to the following side. You also have the ability to control things like the trim and lock stitches. And we've learned about those in previous lessons. And if you want to know more about them, make sure you watch editing text, because these options are all the same regardless of what text tool you're using. So if we come back here, let's take a look at what we can do with the text when we're working with text on a path. First thing you're going to notice is there's a few different icons here, or little options. And we need to just take a look at what those can do for us. Even this one right here, we can rotate it, and it rotates it kind of from here, and you can see I can just swing it back and forth. That's that option. We also have this little box here. So if we click and drag it, you'll notice that basically what it's doing is working with spacing. And it's actually not necessarily spacing, but it's stretching the letters, making them skinnier or wider. But if you're really wanting to wrap around, this is the tool that you can use to do that. And you can fill up that whole area. Just keep in mind it's stretching the letters. So it's changing the size a little bit. Not a whole lot, but it is affecting it. Let's go back to kind of more where it was. That's a little bit, not quite as much, but those are these two options right there, what they'll do for you. And now let's take a look at this one. If we click and drag it, it's going to slant the letters. So it'll kind of, it's like italicizing the letters. And then let's take a look at this icon right here. Let's click and drag it, and you'll see that it will make the lettering larger or smaller, and it's doing it proportionately. So it's not stretching the letters. It's just making them larger or smaller. So that's a good way as well of kind of filling the space. Okay. So those are the different ways in which you can edit this text on a path. And the other things are pretty standard. When you're working with like these diamonds, it's just changing the space between the two letters that are adjacent to it. And you have to make sure you click on it, and you can see how that works. It's just like the other text, or you can select an individual letter, rotate it, move it, resize it. And there's more about that in the editing text section. So that's working with text on a path. Let's take a look at some of the other things that you might be able to do. So the other options you have is when you're in the text edit mode and you right mouse click, you can see that you have edit baseline, and then you have text paths. So if I click on this text paths, notice that I can go right back into my templates. Okay, so if I didn't want to work with that template and I wanted something more along these lines, I could select it, and now it's going to modify to that. So you have that ability to change the path that you have selected. And I'm going to keep it on this one for right now. The things that I might want to do is I might want to stretch it out a little bit, just like we learned in just a few seconds ago. If I right click again, the other thing that I can do is I can edit the baseline. So if I click edit baseline, you're going to see that now I'm in like a edit line mode, and I can change this line and how it's actually shaped. So I can manipulate this line just like I could a regular line that I create. I could even delete a point here. I could delete this point here. And the only reason that you'd want to do that is if you were going to come in and really try to edit this right here. Like if I make this symmetrical, and now I can click and drag, and it just gives me a little bit better of a shape here. and it's very smooth, right? So you can see that I could even wrap this around a little bit and reposition this any way that I want to. And when I right mouse click, it's going to reset to that. And from here, I can make adjustments. Obviously, between this R and the C, I would space that out a little bit. And so that it wasn't running into each other like that. And I might want to do a little bit in here as well. But you can see that you can actually really get in and modify that line. And you can make it work around a shape that you need it to work around. And so it's very handy that way. It's not often that you utilize a tool like this, but there are those occasions where you really need to, and you really want it to follow a certain path. And that's when this tool comes in very handy. And the other thing that you can do is you can reset the frame. So if you adjust it and you don't like where you were, you can always hit reset, and it's going to reset it back to kind of where you were. And you can always go back in here and choose something different, or even the same one, to get back to the original. So the other editing features are just your standard editing features. So you can look at the regular text. You can see that I'm going off of that line, but it's still following that shape. You can do that as well. You can do a lot with working with the lettering on text on a path, and you just have to play around with it, and don't be scared to play around with it. Let's right click again, and let's just take a look. So edit baseline, text paths, and you can export a line. So that is something else you can do. You can create your own little line here or modify it, and you can export it. And basically by doing that, you can take that into creating your own. And that's a different video all in itself. But this is the basic features of text on a path. And let's go ahead and take a look at how we can implement it. So I'm going to go to this design here, and you can see that Cinco de Mayo is here. And let me just click that, and let me undo that there. And let me select this text here. You can see this is using this Tweet font. It's a handwritten font. I can utilize that again if I want. But I'm going to come in here and go to text on a path. And for this one, I'm going to click down here, and I'm going to choose something that is pretty simple here. And you can see that it comes up there. I'm going to come in here and type in Cinco de Mayo and hit apply. And let me go ahead and zoom out a little bit. So you can see I'm going to change this from slate to that tweet and hit apply. And basically what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get it to fit this shape a little bit better. Okay, so by doing this text on a path, I can come in here now and I can modify and get this line to kind of follow this same shape. So if I go into I need to select it, right click, go to edit text here. Now what I want to do is I'm going to just play around with this a little bit, with this line in particular. So the height, size of the text is pretty good. I might want to adjust it a little bit, but I'm going to adjust the line first. Okay, so I'm going to edit this baseline. Basically what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to get it to follow this same path here. So I like to just come in and delete some of the points right off the bat. And the reason I like to do that is I like to get it much simpler. Okay, so delete that point. So when I have this line here, you can see that the shape is basically like this. Okay, so I want this one to kind of come up and down and over. So I'm going to come to about right here, and I'm going to just try to follow and keep a similar distance. And when I talk about distance, I'm meaning between here and here. like trying to keep that same amount of distance. Let's see what happens if I right click right now. So you can see that it does a pretty good job of following that path. Now, the things that I can do is I can modify from here. I could just select it and I could move it a little bit. I could even rotate it slightly if I wanted to. But I'm kind of more following that path. And let me come back in here. Let me undo one time. I'm going to come back and go to edit text. So at this point, the only things that I would kind of work on is the lettering. So I would come in and just move these a little bit closer together so that they're kind of touching each other. And this is going to change the location of a lot of these letters here. But this is something that I would definitely do and bring them in together so that it looks more realistic. So you can see here. And so there's not so much space. That kind of bothers me. So now you can see that I'm following that path really well. The other things I could play around with the sizing of the text and just do the basic editing. And this is pretty good right here, kind of like this. So I'm just going to rotate this slightly because visually I think that it just needs to be a little bit. And that is working with text on a path and how you can utilize it in a project that you're working with.